Good afternoon. I'm back. This is Ed Crow. We're going to get started actually here in a minute. So, a couple quick things before we get started. If you have any questions, please send them into the webinar and I'm going to answer them at the end, or try to answer them, I should say. We record all our webinars, so we usually do them Wednesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock. If you're not getting our emails consistently, check your spam, because if you're on, obviously you got the email at some point. But we do them usually Wednesday and Thursday, various topics, and we record all of them. So we will email out the recording to everybody that registers. So for future reference, if you want to watch one of our webinars, but you can't make the time, if you just register, you'll get the recording, even if you don't attend. And also, if you want to watch any of our old webinars, and we have over 100 of them recorded, go to YouTube, Crow and Associates. So it's YouTube, Crow and Associates. And you can, if you're really bored, I guess, watch our webinars there. So, all right, so today we're going to talk about the Medicare marketing rule changes. This is specific to the final rule. The Medicare final rule made some new requirements as far as call recording, so we're going to touch on that today. So we'll go over the actual rule change, talk about who it applies to, go into detail on the call recording requirement, talk about TPMO disclaimer details, and then we do have a solution for this. There's actually 3 national platforms that our agents can use for enrollments, and all 3 of them are going to have recording capabilities, and that's Connector, Sunfire, and Medicare Bot. So we'll talk about all 3 of those at the end as well. And just one thing I want to do, I was a little hesitant on this webinar because I usually like to kind of have the final say, but this one is a little open to interpretation. So some of the rules in the final rule were very broad stroke on the rules. So you wonder a little bit, and we're still trying to get more clarification, you wonder to what extent they're applicable. So I'm going to give you the rule as it's listed, and it's a catch-all rule the way it's listed. It may not be to that extent when we get further clarification of it, but again, I'm going to give it to you as it reads. So what I talk about today, you might not want to be quite as alarmed as what I'm talking about, because again, the reality of it may be the requirements aren't applicable to some of the things we're discussing. But as soon as we get updates and more clarification, certainly we'll maybe do another webinar on it or send an email notice out or something such as that. So having said that, let's get started. And I have a lot of people coming on. If you have questions, I'm certainly going to answer them for you at the end of the webinar. So a little more to follow on that. Okay, so the new rule, it's applicable, so it takes effect October 1st, 2022. So that's when it starts. So for starts then, and applicable to AAP business. Obviously, you can start talking to consumers about 2023 benefits on October 1st. If you don't use that window from October 1st to October 15th to set up calls and kind of preempt your clients and get them prepared, then you should. That's a good time frame. I used to really take advantage of that. Obviously, an app can't go in until the 15th, but you can start talking about it on the 1st. The rules I'm talking about are applicable to all TPMOs. So those are third-party marketing organizations. That's what it stands for. And the definition of who's a TPMO has been greatly expanded recently. A TPMO is really anybody, an NMO, an FMO, uplines like a Pinnacle Financial, Crow and Associates, an agency, a brokerage, an independent agent, us, or a broker. So really applies to pretty much, the way it's written, it applies to pretty much everybody at this point. And then this rule we're talking about today applies to MAPDP and MAPD business, not MedSups. Remember, MedSups are not a CMS regulated product, so they do not fall within these guidelines. So what rules do you have to comply with? Okay, so the main changes are a couple things. First of all, it puts a call recording requirement in place. So the way it's listed right now, and as I said, open to interpretation some of this, so it might not be as quite as stringent as it looks until we get further clarification. But the way it's listed right now, it says you have to record all calls with beneficiaries in their entirety, including the enrollment. So that's one thing, the call recording requirement. And then it says you have to use the TPMO disclaimer on a variety of things. We're going to get more into that later. When conducting lead generating activity, you got to disclose to the beneficiary that he or she is being transferred to a licensed agent who can enroll them into a plan. That's really more for a lead company who is talking to somebody and they're going to transfer them to a licensed agent to be enrolled. They have to say to them, okay, at this point I'm going to transfer you to a licensed agent to be enrolled. Maybe not as applicable to the people on the phone here on that one, but I wanted to list it. So the disclaimer, if we talk a little bit more about that, the TPMO disclaimer, and this is applicable to us, is going to have to be a disclaimer that says we do not offer every plan available in your area. Any information we provide is limited to those plans we do offer in your area. Please contact Medicare.gov or 1-800-MEDICARE to get information on all options. So, logically, now I'll show you where this has to be applied. But the question comes up, well, what if I do offer all plans? And we have gotten clarification on that. If you do offer all plans, you do not have to use this disclaimer. I just caution you to be careful there because you might be in an area where there's a PDP that doesn't contract with agents, for example. Well, you don't offer all plans then. But if you are in a state where you can contract as an agent and offer all plans, then you would not need this disclaimer. So when do you use the disclaimer? So if you're on a phone call, so if you're on a sales call with somebody, it's got to be relayed verbally within the first minute of that sales call. So verbal TPMO disclaimer, that disclaimer verbally is only required on a sales call, not all calls. So only if you're making a sale to a person or attempting to make a sale do you have to give them that disclaimer. That disclaimer needs to be on any kind of electronic format. So electronically when communicating with a beneficiary through email, online chat, or other electronic means. It's got to be prominently on your website. It's got to be on all marketing materials, including print materials and TV ads. So you need to add that disclaimer. I'll go back for a minute. This one, TPO disclaimer, that has to be, if you're doing a sales call, it's got to be stated in the sales call within the first minute. And it's got to be on all electronic communications, email, marketing materials, your website. It needs to be there. TV ads, radio ads. I mentioned this earlier. When is it not required? Well, it's not required when you're meeting in person, so you don't need this disclaimer if you're meeting somebody in person. If you sell on behalf of one carrier only, in other words, you're an ICA or a captive rep and you only sell one carrier, you don't have to use this disclaimer. And then the last one I mentioned earlier, if you sell plans on behalf of more than one carrier and you sell all commercially available MA and PDP plans in a given service area, then you don't need it. But you got to be careful, like I said, maybe there's a PDP that's not commissionable or it doesn't contract agents. I guess the non-commissionable wouldn't matter, but if they don't contract with agents, then technically you don't offer that plan. And again, I'm sure we'll have questions. I will answer them at the end. All right, so that's the disclaimer part. Showed you the language. Again, I'll record this and we'll send this recording out to you. So if you didn't get a chance to jot it down, you can just go back and look at the recording. Okay, so more on the call recording. So TPMO must record, and I say TPMO, and like I said earlier, that pretty much is everybody at this point. So I'll just say we must record all calls with beneficiaries in their entirety, including the enrollment process. So the way this is written, it's vague, and it's very catch-all, the statement. And again, this is what we're trying to get clarification on. It appears to include inbound and outbound calls with consumers with lead generation, marketing, and the enrollment process. They use a term called the chain of enrollment. So if you're making any call that is going to lead to an enrollment, so chain of enrollment, events when the beneficiary becomes aware of an MA or PDP plan until the end of the process and even follow-up calls. So the way this thing is written, it is more or less saying anything that leads to a sale ultimately needs to be recorded. So that would be a number of things if you think about it. Like even, for example, during AEP, you've got all your clients and you got to call them. That technically should be recorded. I think when we get clarification, this might be restricted down a little because the way it's written, I think they wrote it just to include if they wanted everything. But we'll get further clarification because I have a hard time believing they're going to want to make us record every part of a conversation, even, for example, making AEP calls to existing clients. The interesting thing about recordings is a lot of states have requirements that consumers be notified they're being recorded, like Connecticut, for example. In our state, if you're recording somebody, you have to say, please note this call is being recorded. Not all states require that, but some do, and you got to be careful. If you're in a state that requires notification, disclosure of recording, then you got to get in the habit when you call somebody and you're recording that call of letting them know it's being recorded. This is important for agents that are, we have a lot of former telesales people that are calling in multiple states. So you really got to, I think what I would say is just to use that statement every single time just to cover yourself regardless of the state you're in. So again, I wrote down there, notify the consumer at the outset of the inbound and outbound calls that the call is being recorded just to cover, CYA for you. That recording needs to be maintained for 10 years. And again, Connect Your Sunfire Medicare Bot will handle that part for you. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So remember, this all applies, I wrote applied, but it's applies. This all applies to marketing on the phone. So it's not applicable to in-person things, such as an in-person educational event, not applicable to a face-to-face meeting. So face-to-face with people for an educational event, face-to-face for a sales or marketing meeting, you don't have to record anything, you're face-to-face. So, for example, if you have an educational seminar, as an example, and at that seminar you book a bunch of appointments, then there's no call recording requirement. So I wrote on there, what about the call to the person that attended the educational event? Well, if you read this by the letter of the law, it technically says you have somebody at an educational event, you follow up the next day, call them and try to book an appointment. Technically, it says that falls under the chain of enrollment and you need to record that call. Again, hopefully we'll get more clarification on that soon. I find it hard to believe they're going to require that, but it's just if you really just look at how the rule is written, that's kind of what it's implying. Okay, so again, there's some things still left up in the air. I just wanted to give you a good feel for kind of what it looks like. What are the immediate steps you can take? Well, you can add the disclaimer to your website. That's going to have to happen no matter what. So that disclaimer is going to have to go on your site. And maybe you don't have a lead generation site. Well, you still should put it on there. Add the disclaimer to all email communications. And by far the easiest way to do this is put it on your signature. So I know I talk to a lot of agents who, savvy people in the business a long time, but they don't have a signature. Like they don't have their name, their contact information, their website on their signature. Really, in my opinion, you should. And that is a perfect place to put this disclaimer. So that way, when you email anybody, you're covered. You put the disclaimer in your signature, you're good. The next one needs more clarification as well. They're saying for all communications, print material, for example, vendors you use for leads, that they have to be on a list to make sure they're compliant. And so what they recommend is make a list of all vendors, contractors, and subcontractors who perform lead generation, sales, or marketing and enrollment functions. And you would take that list and send it to your upline for them to have it on file. And that way you can say, here are the vendors, the lead companies that I'm working with. I want to make sure they're compliant with the new rules. I'm not sure if they're going to put that responsibility on the upline and just have them do it, or if this is something that's going to be a reality for us. But that's how it's written right now. So as I said, your FMO, there's not really clarification on this yet, but your FMO might be able to take that list and submit it for you to the carriers. You've got to add the disclaimer to all marketing materials, including print and TV ads. If you have old marketing materials, they need to be updated. All right, so recording requirements, basically two big takeaways here. You got recording requirements, again, that hopefully aren't quite as strict as they look initially. And you have the disclaimer requirement that can be handled because you can put that on your website, on your email. It is certainly a hassle to add it to your current marketing materials, but it would need to be done. So what three systems then are we going to use, Crone Associates and our agents, to handle the call recording piece? So we have three of them. And I probably should have put this one last because it's probably the one that we'll use the least. But My Medicare Bot, in all three systems, by the way, you have access to at no cost. One of them is My Medicare Bot. My Medicare Bot is a system that already records, so it's set up to do it. It's made for voice signature enrollment, so you can go on there, access a number of carriers from one spot, enroll people over the phone through voice signature, and it records. And right now they have UHC, Aetna, Humana, and Cigna. They're working on Anthem and WellCare. So the reason I say I probably should have put Medicare Bot last is because they don't have all the carriers, which our next two platforms we're going to show you do. But that's an option. All three of these we will have under connectformedicare.com. And we can, again, just call us. We can tell you more about it, but we house them all under Connect for Medicare. All three are national companies. The two that we'll probably use the most are Connector and Sunfire. We use them the most currently. Connector and Sunfire, if you're not familiar, are both national enrollment platforms, have all the major carriers, and you can enroll people through text or email. They are going voice enrollment as well, though they will have that functionality. And both have confirmed they'll be compliant with the recording requirement. So they'll record the calls. They'll keep the recordings for 10 years. You'll be compliant using both systems. And again, we offer both Connector and Sunfire for free. If you haven't used them, they're great. I mean, they're CRMs. They'll save drug lists. They'll save doctor lists. You can enroll right through those systems. It's one place to log in, access all your information, and enroll. Costs nothing to use them because we pay for it. So great systems. Connector has said they are likely to charge for the recording capability. Sunfire said they likely will not be charging for it. So that will probably be a big push to Sunfire. I kind of like Sunfire anyway, but the odds are they will not charge anything extra for the recording. And we pay for Sunfire and Connector. But obviously, if they had extra charges applicable, they would, they'd forward those to the agent. But Sunfire is saying they won't have any. So Sunfire, that might give them the nod over everybody else. We have a webinar. I've done multiple ones, in fact, on how to use Sunfire and Connector, how to access them, all those kind of things. When we send out the recording, we'll send you a link to that recorded webinar of how to access and use Sunfire. Again, if you want to see any of the old webinars, including that one, go to youtube.com, Crow & Associates. I did a Sunfire webinar. It's the one from July 25th, so you could access it there. All right, a couple final things. So we'll send the recording out to everyone. Crow offers a number of programs. I go over them usually on every webinar, so people on are probably familiar. It's a free lead program that's $500 per agent per month. You can use that for any lead company you want, any advertising, marketing for Medicare. You submit us receipts. We'll reimburse you up to $500 a month for your costs to help you with your marketing efforts. We do make free agent websites. Basically, all you need is a URL, which you can get one for $20 for 2 years off GoDaddy, and we'll make a logo and a site for you. We have a T65 seminar program. It's an educational T65 seminar program. We're averaging about 70 attendees per seminar, and that's been a great program for us. We can run it in all 50 states, run it year-round. Really great program. You have people turning 65, again, averaging about 70. You'll have sitting in front of you for your seminar, which is done over the course of 2 evenings. Okay, that's what we have. I'm going to see if we have any questions. I'm sure we probably do. Okay, so let's see what we got for questions. So somebody said, I heard the recording rule does not apply to paper applications. Well, it doesn't apply to face-to-face meetings. So if you were talking to somebody over the phone and mailing them an app, it would apply to you. If you're meeting with somebody at their home, it wouldn't. So, you're meeting them face-to-face, you should be okay. The only thing we need to get clarification on is it kind of says, well, what about that initial call you make to set up the appointment? It's kind of insinuating that that's got to be recorded too. Hopefully clarification will come and say, no, that doesn't need to be. But you're right, the face-to-face does not need to be recorded. We've been told for years that you can't make cold calls to people, yet so many people in Medicare are approaching Medicare get multiple cold calls and CMS does nothing about it. They're going after the wrong people. I can't disagree with that at all. In fact, that's a lot of the conversation. It is thought that this rule was made to really cut down and restrict call centers from doing exactly what you're saying. And it seems as though it's kind of punishing us instead. So, yes, I agree. Is there a certain font size that must be disclosed? That's an awesome question. I don't know the answer. I could make something up, but I'm not sure. I can definitely find out on that. I think there is, to answer your question, but I don't know what it is. But I can get that for sure. If you want to call us or email us, I'd be happy to get that answer and provide it. If we had a Zoom or virtual face-to-face meeting, would that need to be recorded? Yes. They specifically point that out, that a Zoom or virtual needs to be recorded. What is the exact disclosure statement we need to include? That was the one on the webinar. So that was the, hang on a minute. Right there, TPMO disclaimer. That's the exact language of it right there. Let's see what else we got. Bunch of questions here. Okay, can we transfer existing clients to Sunfire from Connecture? Yes is the answer to that. Well, you've got it. It's not as easy as you would think. You have to try to download an Excel file from Connecture, and then you can easily upload a file into Sunfire. That's not an issue. But downloading from Connecture is a little more difficult, but it can be done. Lead companies need to include the disclaimer. Yes. Question was, do lead companies need to include the disclaimer? Yes, they do. What if a client asks that they not be recorded? So that's a really good question. That one specifically is an example given. And what it says is you just have to very politely say to them, I'm sorry, I can't continue on if you won't allow the recording. Let's see. Could you review the recording rule? What if I complete the app using online method? Yeah, so if you're doing the app using online method, that's got to be recorded. Pretty straightforward on that one. And that's where like Connecture, Sunfire, or Medicare bot will do that. And the carriers will be set up. So if you like to use the carrier direct, which our agents do everything, Connecture, Sunfire, Medicare bot. Some like to use the enrollment direct through the carrier's online method. You can do that with us. That's fine. But they should be set up to record as well. In fact, they've said they will be. But yes, that would need to be recorded. Oh, thank you. 12 font size is the requirement. So a 12 font size is required. Appreciate that answer. Let's see. Hi, Ed. Will the number they record on be our number or one from CRM platform? Thanks. Yeah, it's going to be one from the CRM platform most likely. We're still getting details on that, but they're kind of giving you some different options. It can be an 800 number, or it could be a local number, but the problem is they're going to make us choose an area for the local number, which will only let us use one, so that doesn't really work. So most likely an 800 number, but that's Connecture. Sunfire might have a different solution. So hopefully the solution would be that they can have a number that looks local no matter where you are. Somebody said there's going to be a lot of paper apps this year. Agreed. I think there will be a whole lot of paper this year. So if the goal is to kill more trees, I think that's going to be successful. Can we enroll on Connecture and record on Zoom? Yes. They don't care how you record as long as you record and as long as it's kept for 10 years. How do you download files from Connecture? That's something I'd have to send you instructions on. I'd be lying if I said off the top of my head I knew. Call us or email us for that, and we'll try to get that for you. Any idea on Connecture's cost for recording? No. I just know they seemed small, but I think if you did the math, it added up. It was something you would notice. Let's put it that way on Connecture. So we'll get more on that soon. But Connecture will definitely. It looked like it would add up, even though it looked like really kind of benign small numbers. If you do enough enrollments on it, I think it would be a big deal. But we'll get more on that as time goes on. Okay, when I enroll people in my office, I do it on Connecture, but it's in person. Yeah, if it's in person, you don't have to record an in-person meeting. So you could enroll them on Connecture in your office, and that would not have to be recorded. Does recording rule apply to MedSup? No. Medicare supplements are not a CMS-regulated product, so it does not. Can we still do online app while doing a face-to-face with the client? Yes, because if you're face-to-face, that would not need to be recorded. Where do you need to post a disclaimer on your website if you offer other products? It doesn't say. It just says prominently. So I would guess that means homepage. I don't know the exact answer to that yet, but that is the language prominently displayed on the website. I certainly can try to get more information on that, but that's all I know right now about that. A lot of good questions today. I appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be more. And again, I think we'll get more clarification if they go by exactly how the rule's written. I'd be surprised. I really would. So I think, I'm hopeful that we'll get clarification down the road that says, no, if somebody is a current client, you're just calling them just to make an appointment or have them come in, that doesn't have to be recorded. But again, I guess we'll see. Oh, good question. I'm glad you brought it up. I forgot to mention this. How are they going to police this? So the way it's policed is regulated, monitored, whatever you want to say. The carriers have that responsibility. So the carriers have the responsibility to police this and make sure that it's being followed. I think what you're going to see really is what will happen is when there's a complaint, that's where this will come into play. Client complains, they complain to CMS, they complain to the carrier. Suddenly if this was a phone sale where you didn't meet with the person, then they want to see the recording because they want information to see if the complaint's founded or unfounded. And that's where I think we would run into some problems. Who should we contact to express our disgust with this crap? I would guess that would be your local rep or a senator. But I think there's been a lot of that. I know, for example, NAHU, and AHIP have both been very vocal about this, and they probably have, the ear of people, higher up than we can get a hold of. But so far, nothing's changed, which surprises me. This was proposed. I thought there would be adjustments to it. By this point, there have not been. But certainly I know a lot of organizations like AHIP and NAHU have been very vocal about this and saying what somebody said earlier, basically saying, listen, you're trying to cut down calls from call centers, and this isn't going to do it. And to a degree, there's some thoughts that maybe people are thinking also, maybe they're trying to keep organizations from acting like a call center when they're not actually one. But again, that's theoretical. I don't really know for sure. Okay, well, listen, I really appreciate everybody for joining me. Thanks for coming on today. I'm glad to have you. Sorry I couldn't answer all the questions, but that's definitely had a lot more information than our last version of this we did a couple months ago. And as we get more updates, we'll provide them for sure. And if you have any questions, please give us a call and be happy to speak with you. And we'll send out the recording and some other information as well. Thanks, and I hope everybody has a great day.